I don't know about you, but I'm sold.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Baseball Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Welcome to the Atlanta Baseball Party, your home for the best Atlanta Braves baseball talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Grant McAuley. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/locked-on-MLB and use code lowercase locked on MLB for a first deposit match up to $100. The Atlanta Baseball Party is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's show, we'll talk about if one slump is cause for concern and going deep, or our back-to-back L's cause for concern. We'll talk about that too in this stretch. But first, let's talk about another good get by Double A. Grant, Chris Sale is 3-1 so far this season and has a .92 whip through 5 starts. In his last outing, which was Friday, he pitched 7 innings, gave up just 2 runs and struck out 6. So has Sale established himself as Alex Anthopoulos' maybe best offseason acquisition as far as what we can see to this date?
Yeah, I mean, with respect to what Reynaldo Lopez has also done in the early going, both of the starters that he brought in are doing exactly what you hope they do. They've been covering innings. They've been giving the Braves a chance to win just about every time out. And in the case of Chris Sale, to your point, I mean, I think he's shown that A, he's healthy, and everything else just kind of works off of that, because then B, he can be successful because he's actually out there every fifth day. And I went back and looked at the numbers. He's thrown 7 innings and 3 consecutive starts for the first time since June of 2018. It's been a hot minute. I know there were a lot of injuries in the last 5 years as well, but he only threw 7 innings in 2 starts for the Boston Red Sox last year. So you're starting to see that factor of his efficiency is allowing him to pitch deep into games. And that's something I asked Brian Snitker about. And he said, yeah, it all comes back to being healthy. I mean, we felt strongly, and the front office obviously did, that he would be healthy and could make an impact, and that's exactly what we're seeing.
And I think you onto something, because he's been efficient too, Grant. Because when you think about, like, he had 40 pitches in the first 2 innings against Cleveland on Friday night, and then he finished with 95. And you're talking about 3 straight 7-inning appearances. And I think Matt Olson even talking about he looked like his old self, right?
Yeah.
Back in 2018 when he finished his 7th consecutive year finishing in the top 6 in the AL Cy Young voting, which is absolutely ridiculous when you think about it. So if you're talking about being 35 years old, having had so many injuries and everything like that, you just got to feel like Alex Anthopoulos like really did his homework on this one, because he didn't give up peanuts and a piece of candy and some bubble gum, right? He gave up Vaughn Grissom, a guy who everybody was pretty much excited about. So for him to take that type of chance, I feel like it has to be one of those top guys. With respect to Reynaldo Lopez, for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you look back and it feels like, and let me just preface by saying this or kind of qualifying it, it feels like forever and ago when we were absolutely devastated, both as media who, love to see this team win, but also as Braves country, the fan base, when Spencer Strider went down. And because there were so many questions, even though there were some good showings from both Chris Sale and Reynaldo Lopez in spring, but man, I mean, Jarvis, you can't say enough about what those guys have been able to do to really kind of allay the concerns that anyone might have had about whether or not this Braves pitching rotation could survive the loss of Spencer Strider. So yeah, seeing what Chris Sale has been able to do so far, you definitely have to tip your hat to Alex Anthopoulos. And last night wasn't the greatest for Reynaldo Lopez. A little bit tough because he gave up the 3 earned runs in the Braves loss to the Mariners Tuesday. But Jarvis, it is just one game. So we don't want to put too much cause for concern there. So before I kind of ask a question on the bullpen, still want to talk about Reynaldo Lopez and saying that, hey, in spite of the fact that it may not have been his best outing so far this season, we've still, for the most part, seen solid returns from him. And I wouldn't necessarily say also that there's a cause for panic when you give up 3 runs.
I mean, when you think about that aspect of it, right? He's the type of guy that he wanted this. He wanted to be a starter, right? Like, that wasn't something that, hey, Alex Anthopoulos pitched to him. Like, he wanted to be a starter again. So, and you think about, for the money that he's getting right now, what is it, 3 years and $30 million on $10 million on average? that's not big time money, when you think about from a starting pitching standpoint. So for me, I feel like truly confirmed, like, hey, this is what I want to be, and I'm going to continue to do this. And you talking about 3 runs, that's not a lot of runs in today's age. So for him to be, have a type of outing that he did, yes, it's a little concerning given what the ridiculousness that he's been pitching before that we saw before. Yeah, it's a blip on the screen, I feel, but yeah, I'm not too concerned about him. But yeah, it is definitely a confirmation that, hey, Alex Anthopoulos, like, he's been continuing to do his job, and those guys have been really having a great return on their investment so far.
And Grant, speaking of ridiculousness, and you talk about the 3 runs that the Mariners hit, it took the Braves kind of running into a historic pitching outing from these Mariners, first team in MLB history to post an ERA of 1.6 or lower and 160 plus strikeouts in an 18-game span. I mean, that's what the Braves came up against going into Seattle. So you kind of have to, measure it out and meet it out as far as what we saw in Lopez last night. But speaking of the bullpen, Jesse Chavez, Aaron Bummer held the Mariners scoreless. They struck out 4 batters and at least gave the Braves a chance at a comeback. So for you, Grant, has the bullpen held up their end of the bargain so far this season?
Yeah, definitely. And there's 2 things that I would kind of add, just building off of what Lopez did last night. I mean, he's looked great in the first 4 starts, especially allowing 1 or fewer runs.
Yeah.
1 run in 2 of his starts, scoreless ball in his other 2 starts. That's not going to take place all season long. That's a high bar to expect. And while it would be wonderful, I think that even if like an outing like last night is his down outing, he really only made 1 mistake. He left a changeup up, and that's the ball Polanco hit over the right field wall. Other than that, I mean, Reynaldo Lopez looked like Reynaldo Lopez, and more times than not, you're going to have a chance to win once this offense gets going, which I'm sure we'll get into later. But as far as the bullpen's concerned, with what the Braves starting rotation has done the past 2 weeks, really after the Houston series, that nice homestand that they've had, about a week or 10 days now, this group has routinely been able to cover those innings, and that has allowed the bullpen not to have to come in when the starter is done after 5 and try to
Yeah.
figure out how you're going to get the last 12 outs every night. That is a good way to wear out your bullpen. As of the end of the weekend, the Braves had the second fewest innings pitched out of their bullpen in all of Major League Baseball. Only the
Wow.
Phillies
Yeah.
had fewer. That speaks to the fact that your starting rotation is beginning to click, your bullpen's not getting overtaxed. And when that's the case, typically you're going to find good results and good numbers out of that bullpen. And I think we've been seeing that a lot as the Braves starting rotation ERA, as of Sunday's game anyway, before they got started in Seattle, had lowered, and I guess it's lowered since with Max Fried's outing, and Lopez wasn't bad. 4th best in the National League as far as ERA out of the rotation, and the bullpen 4th best ERA in Major League Baseball
Yeah.
as far as bullpens are concerned. I say all that to say it's all working together, and when it does that, you have both units have the opportunity for success.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people, to start the season, Aaron Bummer had kind of got off into a bummer of a start. Got to throw that little lame
There
joke
it
in. Sorry.
We're going to go with lame, but go on.
Right. Yeah. So, outside of that, he's been so solid. Then you talking about clean, having several consecutive clean innings. After that Philly performance. So I think that this collective and AJ Minter, doing what he's been able to do. You think about Raisel Iglesias coming in, to help extend and get into the extra innings, and think about the guys that they have to come in, Joe Jimenez and Pierce Johnson, like those.
Yeah.
This bullpen is just absolutely loaded, and I think that when you have that type of bullpen, they haven't been stressed out because of the innings that the starting rotation, like Grant mentioned, have been how they've been going. It's just been a beautiful thing to watch, and I think like how it's all coming together. You understand and see the vision that Alex Anthopoulos had when he brought all these guys in.
Yeah, and I think it's always good when we don't have to point to one area of getting the job done. I also saw it. I know we'll talk a little bit later about the game, but even defensive plays, like the Braves are on their game defensively as well. And I feel like we don't talk about that enough. But yeah, I feel like despite the fact that yes, they lost the series and yes, they lost the game on Tuesday night, it's still an all-around effort that each and every night puts this team in a position to win. So I would say there's not a cause for concern necessarily for a slump, but we'll debate about it. When we come back, we'll go about that in Going Deep. This episode of the Atlanta Baseball Party is brought to you by DoorDash and by PrizePicks. So think about this. You're watching your game and the Braves, you don't want to like walk away because you want to see how things go with the Braves. Well, you know how you can do that? By ordering through DoorDash. There's an opportunity to get 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15+ on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail order now on DoorDash. And it's pretty simple if you think about it, because Mother's Day really is right around the corner, and you may forget or you may not have an opportunity to get the great gift that you want to. Don't worry about it. DoorDash will help you with that because they will deliver whatever your mom loves the same day. And the gifts that they give are thoughtful because of the fact that, hey, you still picked it. It's just that they kind of helped you out last minute, but they help you out with the opportunity to give from over 100 expertly crafted bouquets to the best of tech to self-care essentials and more. Again, delivered right to her door. Now, does she have a sweet tooth? No problem. Beauty connoisseur? No problem at all. You can make her smile with a fruit or flower bouquet, but also a makeup bouquet and even workout wear. So get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place. 50% off your next order. $15 when you spend 15+ on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with code Locked On MLB. That's LOCKEDON MLB, all lowercase. Order using DoorDash today. Now, terms do apply, but again, what you got to lose? 50% off your next order, $15 when you spend 15+ on your next flower. That's what you get with DoorDash. Using the code Locked On MLB, order using DoorDash today, and don't forget, terms do apply. This episode of the Atlanta Baseball Party is also brought to you by PrizePicks. Spring training, yes, it is over, and the baseball season is official. Don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond in your PrizePicks entries, whether it's strikeouts, like we were just talking about a little bit earlier, with the fabulous job that the Braves pitching rotation is doing, or it's RBIs or first inning runs. Enter the Ozzy Albies in the chat. Take your pick of more or less and add them to your PrizePicks entry today. Get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks as you and the world's best players and what we think is the best team in baseball, the Braves, take the game to a new level during baseball season. But also, there's an opportunity for you to bet on basketball's postseason as well, which has been absolutely compelling in the first round. Now, if you want to take advantage of these PrizePicks opportunities, and even going back to some of those baseball players as well. Like I said, Ozzy Albies is back and looking as good as ever. You can do that by downloading, first of all, the PrizePicks app. Then you would use Locked On MLB as your code for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that is PrizePicks, up to $100 on your first bet. You can't lose. First deposit match, $100, code Locked On MLB. So, Jarvis, we know that Ronald Acuna Jr. has not been his Ronald Acuna Jr. MVP self so far in 2024. Now, let's caveat that, though, because we're talking about Ronald Acuna Jr. as far as what he's been able to do at the plate. Not quite himself in that regard. And last night, 0 for 4, struck out twice. But as always, want to kind of caveat that because we're talking about him at the plate as opposed to him in the outfield and as opposed to him stealing bases. But that said, do you have concern? Because we talked about this last week. We talked about him. We talked about Matt Olson and Austin Riley. We'll talk about them again. But do you feel like this is that point where maybe you should get a little panicky about Ronald Acuna Jr.? If not, at what point would you kind of have some concern about what you're seeing out of him so far this season?
To be honest with you, being that we are, coming up on, we have completed a 1 month of play. You got to start. For me, I got to start thinking about, okay, looking at the numbers and you trying to look at some certain things. Like if you're looking at the trends as far as like strikeout rate, that's up quite a bit. Being that he had that significant drop last year, coming from the year before, the year prior to that season, coming into last year. And of course, we saw that MVP season, right? But and that's the thing that I started looking at, right? Because when you look at that strikeout rate going up, That means he's not being as patient as he was. That means more so he's maybe pressing a little bit,
Yeah.
and to the tune of he only has one home run on this year.
Yeah.
Those are some of the things that I have to look at and say, you know what? Even though I know more than likely he's going to get this thing rolling, but
Mhm.
you have to start looking at saying, okay, or maybe even think about it from this standpoint, T. Maybe we're looking at the standard being what was last year, which is
Yeah.
absolutely crazy to try to
Insane.
hold them
Yeah.
to that standard, right? So I feel like if there's a drop off, like what's the drop off? Are we talking about 20 home runs and
Yeah.
maybe only 45 stolen bases or 40 stolen bases? You know what I'm saying? So when you think about it from that standpoint, if we looking at the end of the year, I'm like, oh man, 25, 30 home runs, you
Mhm.
know, 40 stolen bases, that's not a bad season at all.
Yeah.
But we compare it to the MVP years, like, oh man, what's going on? So I think this is the kind of the drop off, but the one main thing that I'm concerned about is that
Mhm.
strikeout rate. I
Yeah.
feel like
Yeah.
that has to kind of start moving towards or closer towards what it was last year in order
Mhm.
for him to kind of get back on track. Because when you get up to the plate and you're the leadoff hitter and you start pressing, that's when you start to get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, and I think when you look kind of at the numbers, it is a little bit disconcerting because a slugging percentage of 333, that's the second lowest mark in any of the 27 months of Ronald Acuna Jr.'s career where he's collected at least 50 plate appearances. So it
Right.
does get a little bit disconcerting there. And you think about the fact that some of the struggle is about, hey, he's not hitting the ball as hard as usual. His ground ball rate has surged a lot. And then there's a little bit of whiffing, which I know you alluded to. There's a little bit of whiffing more than is normal for him. But here's the good news: the Braves are 19-9.
Right.
And that means we are only through 28 games. And they almost actually did something that they've never done in the history of the franchise, which is win 20 games by May 1st. So to say that they're doing all of these things without Ronald Acuna Jr. is probably why I wouldn't go into panic mode as of yet. Probably a little bit concerned, but not quite panic mode because, again, it's only 26 games. I still feel like that's a small sample size before we
Mhm.
should get concerned. And I think that if we were seeing something that maybe we could tie to the knee injury that interrupted his spring
Yeah.
training, that would probably make me a little bit more concerned because then I would be concerned that he would re injure that. And then we're talking about him possibly going out on the aisle. And that's a whole other conversation to have. So I'd rather have this conversation about, hey, he's not quite up to himself. The fact that sometimes slumps happen. It's just that we're not accustomed to seeing slumps from him, especially when we're seeing the other areas of his game be what they're supposed to be. He's using the other tools in the five tool kit just fine. I think that's why we're like a little bit confused, but I would say more confused about what he's been not been able to do, rather, as opposed to concerned. Now, as we always say here at the Atlanta Baseball Party, catch us after Memorial Day. And if we're still having this conversation,
Yeah.
yeah, we're probably going to be a little bit more concerned. Also, Jarvis, if we're still having this conversation about Austin Riley and Matt Olson because they obviously started the season much lower than we would have wanted for them as well. But despite of last night, now of course last night was just one of those nights where absolutely positively, I mean, we heard that you guys heard the stat a little bit earlier that I mentioned about what the Mariners are able to do as an entire rotation. But honestly, they just kind of went into a pitching buzzsaw with Luis Castillo last night. So if
True.
we take that out, Jarvis, are you at least encouraged that you've seen Olson and Riley start to come around?
Yeah, when you talk about having a walk off with Austin Riley in the last series against the Cleveland Guardians, that helps me, get a little bit more up about them coming up out of this thing, and then with Matt Olson, I really feel like he's been hitting the ball hard, and that's
Yeah.
one of the things that you kind of take a look at when you talk about your sluggers. The guy that led the MLB in home runs and RBIs last year. When you think about that from that standpoint, you look at those how hard those guys are hitting the ball, and his exit velocity has been pretty doggone up there, and it's almost kind of like okay, why isn't this ball going out the yard now? So I think for those reasons, I'm not too concerned at those guys. I feel like those guys are working their way out of it,
Yeah.
Just from a standpoint of putting the ball in play and putting the ball where the opposing defense isn't, and that, because a lot of times that can, get the things going as well. So I feel like, those two are really starting to work their way back into it. But, like this last homestand, those guys struggle. They struggle. But I feel like, there were moments though where you can look at it and say, you know what, I feel like they're starting to trying to come out of this thing.
Yeah, and I think one other thing that maybe we take for granted, or maybe took for granted before he came back or before he went out, was Ozzy Albies. He's back in the two hole. So that could make a world of difference, because when you look at the last 7 days for him, 5 games, 21 at bats, 8 hits, right?
Yeah.
And 4 RBI.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm thinking to myself, that can also be a positive. And if Ronald Acuna Jr. can just get on base, like maybe, we're not going to see the home runs maybe for a little while longer. Like you said, we've only seen one home run this season. But if you got that guy behind you in the two hole, that also gives Austin Riley and Matt Olson an opportunity to do what you do when you're in the three hole and when you're in the cleanup. So I think it makes a difference, or we're going to see it make a difference as we go along, now that Albies has indeed returned. But there might be another thing that's a cause for concern that we have not seen this season. We'll talk about it in the stretch. This episode of our Locked On Atlanta Baseball Party is brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, we got to pause here to talk about Monopoly Go. Now, you may be saying, okay, you already talked about that, but there's a lot of good stuff to talk about when it comes to Monopoly Go. You can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. There's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and even hilarious emojis to taunt your friends when they're losing. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting because they have constantly changing tournaments and challenges a ton, including their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. So there's always new timed events that help you win big, including the massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench, go download it now free on Google Play or in the App Store. Game on with Monopoly Go. So Jarvis, the Braves have lost back-to-back games for the first time when they took a 3-2 L to the Seattle Mariners Tuesday night. But notice, 28 games in. This has only happened one time so far this season. But hey, things happen. And you kind of wonder to yourself, all right, who do I point the finger at, if it's at all possible to point the finger at anybody other than the historic thing that Luis Castillo and this entire Mariners team has been able to do these last 18 games, including last night?
To be honest with you, you have to kind of look at, we can't complain about the bullpen, right? Because we gave them all the praise. We can't complain about the starting pitcher because you talking about giving up 3 runs last night, against the Seattle Mariners. I feel like gotta go to the bats, right? We can't have I got that big three we talked about earlier. We can't have those guys struggling like they are. Even though we feel like at least Matt Olson and Matt Olson and goodness gracious, I lost
Austin
my train.
Riley?
Austin Riley, yes,
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
Matt Olson, Austin Riley, those guys, we feel like they're coming out of it, but like that, we need that run production because that's one of the highest scoring teams in the league. So we need that run support that the Braves have been giving them, given that starting rotation and bullpen, throughout the year. So I feel like that may be the culprit. But like I said, overall, we talked about our concerns. I'm concerned about Ronald Acuna Jr., but he's still finding ways to be effective. But overall, as a team, you had still sitting at the top of the division, and I was looking at some numbers earlier, and like it said that the team that is in first place or the division leader or tied for the division lead at the beginning of May and in the end of April, the first month of the season, over 50% of them win a division. So, hey, look, we're on the right track. So I feel like, yeah, you lose back-to-back games for the first time, and for the first time this season, but that's something that overall you can't really get too concerned about going forward.
Yeah. And I think too, you got to look at, not just the Tuesday night loss, but you got to look at the Monday night loss as well, because you only get one
Right,
run
right,
on Monday, right?
right.
And like you said, pitching rotation did its job. Max Fried pitched 6 innings, struck out 7, didn't
Yeah.
allow any earned runs, right?
Hmm.
Then Pierce Johnson comes in, gives us a solid inning, 3 strikeouts. Joe Jimenez, okay, well, we kind of know. That was a little
Yeah.
bit of, yeah, a little bit of a struggle bus
Yeah, a
there.
little shaky. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right, because it was, the situation that he walked into was one where there was a no hitter on the line. And of course, he gives up 2 hits. And then AJ Minter comes in and he gives up 2 hits as well. And then, it's kind of like the rest is history. But ultimately speaking, none of that would matter if the bats were alive,
Right.
because still giving up 2 hits, Mentor, 2 hits, Jimenez, that shouldn't be the cause for you to lose a game where you literally had 7 innings of hitless ball. So yeah, the bats have to come alive. Definitely have to come alive today, because we don't want to have a conversation next week for the baseball party where we're even remotely talking about a sweep of the Mariners, of the Braves rather, by the Mariners. Now, speaking of the pitching rotation, yes, it's absolutely been solid. Yes, we know we've gotten solid outings from Max Fried, who's reestablished himself as the ace. We know we've gotten the goods out of Charlie Morton, even Chris Sale and Reynaldo Lopez, because like you said, 3 runs last night wasn't really the determining factor of the game, but that fifth position is still kind of up for grabs. Bryce Elder did have a good showing. Even Darius Vines had one good showing as well. So you have seen flashes of pitchers being called up and saying, "Hey, I'd like that fifth spot." But is there anyone else that you see, Jarvis, who could maybe be that next arm the Braves bring up for a spot start?
Oh, I would have to say it has to be AJ Smith-Shawver, right? Because when you think about what he's been able to do down in
Yeah.
AAA, like
Hmm.
he's recorded velocities of 99.8 and 99.2. And it's just been, you talking about a 99.7. Like that is
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
crazy. And that's a lot, that's almost double what he did last year combined, right? So I think when you have those type of numbers being registered, I'm sure Alex Anthopoulos is sitting up in the office like, how velocity, how people are so in love with those numbers,
Right.
in today's game. So I feel like he'll be their guy, and also your guy, Hurston Waldrop. He got off to a little,
Yes.
yeah, he got off to a little shaky start in his first 2 starts, but he's been lights out ever since, right? As far as with like, he only giving up 1 run in 6 innings on each
Hmm.
of those his next 2 after
Yeah.
after those first 2. So when you think about that, that type of production that they've been showing, and how many eyeballs have been raised, or eyebrows been raised, excuse me. I feel like those are the 2 that I feel like we'll see. Not necessarily Hurston Waldrop right now, but
Right.
I feel like AJ Smith-Shawver for sure. At some point, we're going to see him get that call to come on up.
And I think that's a great point you make about Waldrop, and the fact that you may not see him anytime soon, because again, only 28 games in, and sort of the call up for one game, call back down, that has been working so far for these Braves. But what I do think is encouraging as well is the fact that you don't need Waldrop, but he's starting to show signs of why he'd be good if you had to call him up. And here's another crazy thing that happened in April. Now, granted, it's high A, but it's Owen Murphy.
Yeah,
He, of course,
yeah,
would want to get to double A.
yeah,
He's the
yeah.
Braves' number 5 prospect. 37 strikeouts in 24 frames in April. Just saying.
Oof.
It's another one of those situations, yes, where the Braves have like an embarrassment of riches. So
Sure.
again, I go back to what we said earlier when we were talking to Grant. If you had asked us 6 to 8 weeks ago, Braves country or even the media that cover the Braves were really very concerned about how these Braves were going to do it without Spencer Strider. And not only do you have 4 solids in that starting rotation, but pitchers are being called up for that fifth spot and actually doing their job. So again, Braves are in very, very good space and in a good place as of May 1st. Thanks for stopping by the Atlanta Baseball Party, your home of the best local Atlanta Braves talk. Remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we're free and available wherever you download your podcasts. We'll see you on the Atlanta Sports Party Thursday.